Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining me for episode number 5, I think it is, of Cooking with the Independent Foodie. Today we're going all the way to China, making the Chinese cashew nut chicken today. So I want to take you through the ingredients we're using today. Obviously, cashew nuts. For those who are cooking along, make sure you've roasted your cashew nuts in the oven for roughly about 5 minutes and allow them to cool, otherwise they get a bit chewy. Then we're using 500 grams of chicken. So I'm using thigh meat because I like thigh and it's very good in Chinese cooking. It's also very, very tender and absorbs the flavor as well. And then we're using the rice wine. Now the rice wine is going into the marinade that we're making. We're using roughly 1.5 tablespoons of this wine that'll be going into the actual mix. And then we've also got the sesame oil. So putting 1.5 teaspoons of that going in there. Then you've got a choice. So I'm using, you can use dark soy sauce, but I'm using the light soy sauce. Because earlier this week I tried it out with the dark soy sauce and it is really, really salty. So just be mindful, if you're making this, either use less soy sauce or use a light soy sauce as well. And then you can either use one of two things. So the original recipe uses the oyster sauce, but equally you can use Hosin sauce. So I'm opting for Hosin sauce today, but you know the soy sauce is equally good as well. So either one you can use, but we'll talk about that in a second. Then you also want white pepper. I don't have white pepper, so substitution is black pepper. Just a sprinkling of black pepper will go into your sauce as well. And you also need to have roughly 6 tablespoons of water, and that'll be going to the cook later on when we come to actually start to fry off the chicken in the pan. Then, very importantly, your green pepper. You can use a mixture of green and red. So for today's cook, I'm using the green pepper, and this is really important. Now you want to keep the texture, so make sure you cut it roughly around 2 centimeter strips. Okay, so first thing you want to do is get your bowl. Let's place it over there. Okay, put your bowl. Now the first thing that's going in there is you want to put roughly 3 tablespoons of your light soy sauce. And like I said, if you use the darker one, what you're going to end up is a very, very salty, much darker looking sauce. Now you also then want to add the same 3 tablespoons of either your oyster sauce or you want to use Hoisin. So I'm going to try Hoisin today and let's see how that goes. So we're getting 1, 2 and 3. Okay, that's 3 Hoisin in there. Right, the next thing we want to do is to add roughly 1.5 tablespoons of your rice wine. So I'm using this rice wine here. Shaoxing rice wine. 1. You can use miren if you don't have this. You can use miren instead. That's the other alternative. So it's 1.5 going in there. And then you want to add roughly 2 teaspoons of your 1.5 to 2 teaspoons of your toasted sesame oil. It is quite strong, so I'm going to put 1. Oh, sorry. Yes, that's roughly about 2 teaspoons in there. Okay, and then you want to mix that up, and you put your black pepper. So just a sprinkling of black pepper in there. I'll say roughly about half a teaspoon. Ideally, if you have white pepper is recommended, but I'm going with black pepper in there. Again, you want to mix that up. Right, the reason we're doing this now is I wanted to show you the sort of marinating of the chicken. I'm only going to add a little bit of this into the chicken, right? So it's all mixed up properly. Make sure you mix it. roughly about 3 tablespoons you want to add into there and keep the rest that's going to go in later on. So to mix this up. So now you want to put roughly about a tablespoon of your sesame oil. Right, now for the so for your egg fried rice, so what we're going to be using is, I'm going to be using some orange pepper, I'm going to use some broccoli, some sugar snap peas, some peas, a bit of garlic, a bit of ginger, and I'm going to be using the spring onions as well. Okay. Okay, so the first things we want to get is, once the oil heats up, just move that around. Okay, so let's go back down to the stove. So you want to put your vegetables in the order of cooking. So I think the first thing we're going to put in here is to try and get the broccoli in there. And then what you'll see is I'll take this out and then add the egg and the rice and then add these back in again towards the end. Now remember, there's different ways of doing this. Like I said, we're also going to add a bit of soy sauce in here. People have different ways of doing the egg fried rice. Now, egg fried rice typically is made by, obviously Chinese families using leftover rice from the day before, and we're just trying to recreate that similar egg fried rice today. If you don't like sesame oil, you can use a normal cooking oil. Because sesame, like I said, is quite strong, and therefore it's got lots and lots of flavor in it. So I'm going to put my ginger in. That's roughly a teaspoon of ginger. I'm going to add a teaspoon of garlic. Sorry. A teaspoon of garlic going in there. And remember, you want this garlic and the ginger to fry off. You don't want to have that bitter taste of raw garlic in your mouth. So just let that sort of oil heat up a bit more. And remember, you want this garlic and the ginger to fry off. You don't want to have that bitter taste of raw garlic in your mouth. Let that oil heat up a bit more. Okay, we'll whack my pan up to 8 just to get that moving a bit quicker. Great. Next thing I'm going to add is my broccoli. Now, broccoli can take a bit longer to cook, so I'm going to add the broccoli and start to add also the orange peppers in there. And then the peas and the sugar snaps will go in last. Okay. I just want to saute that and let that sort of just cook a bit. Now remember, in the egg fried rice you want a bit of texture, so you don't want the vegetables to get too soft, but you want them to be cooked through. It's looking good. Add my spring. I'm going to add the white bits of the spring onion, so the bottom part, not the green part of it, just the white bits going in. Okay. So we're putting sugar snaps and your peas in there, and those will come back in again in a second. So. Set that aside. Okay. And now what you want to do is put some vegetable oil roughly about maybe 2 teaspoons of it. A tablespoon. Put 2 teaspoons in there. Roughly about 2 teaspoons that's gone in there. You can add ghee or butter if you wanted to have a bit of extra flavor, but today I'm going to be just using that. Okay, so what we're going to do now is break your eggs in. One. I'm going to put 2 eggs today, feeling a bit generous with the eggs. Make sure you don't get any shells in there like I just did. Okay. And then what you're going to do very quickly is break the egg up, mix that around. And before that fully cooks, you want to get your rice. Okay. And you also want to get your soy sauce. So I'm going to put roughly about 1, 2 tablespoons of soy sauce in there. You can add some miren as well if you want to. You know, it depends on your preferences. I'm not. So we're going to add 1, 2, about a cup of rice going in there. Okay, and you want to mix it up again. And now you want to cook that egg through with the rice. Now it looks a bit darker because of the soy sauce, but you want to get that flavor from the soy in the rice as well. And as the egg is cooking, you want to add your vegetables back in. Now, the reason I said to you always use a day-old rice is because when you're using freshly cooked rice, it's still sticky, it's still wet, and it can start to stick, or you can get sort of smashed up together. Okay, so just let that steam a bit. Close the lid. And we want to taste that in a second to see if we need to add some salt or not, if the soy was enough. Try that. Now, because we're eating this with the cashew nut chicken, I'm not going to add any salt to it because it does need a bit of salt. But the saltiness of the soy and the other sauces that we've used earlier on is going to make this a bit saltier. So we're not going to add more salt in this. I think we're in a good place with that. And remember, this is still hot. So what I'm going to do is show you what it looks like, then close it up and let it just sit on the side and let the sort of peas just steam away in the background. Okay, so that's roughly what it looks like. You can see it. Okay, so that's done. Okay, so we've got your wok on. Make sure that the wok is nice and hot. The wok's heating up nicely. You want to add your oil. Now remember, it's 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil going in here. 1, 2. And really important now, you want to make sure that you move that all around your wok. So it heats up very quickly. Drop it down to 6. And now what you want to do is add your onions. So we're using half an onion that's going in. And remember the onions now, when you're cutting them, try and get them into little squares like this. So roughly around 1 centimeter by centimeter, 2 centimeter long pieces. That's going to go in. Add that in. So onion in first, together with your garlic. So we're using 2 garlic crushed. Up in there. Now remember, you don't want the onions to caramelize, you just want them to get really, really soft and become translucent. But you still want to keep that a bit of texture in the onion. Okay, you've got that in there. Right, now you've got your chicken that's been marinating for 10 minutes, roughly. We're going to take the chicken and chuck that in. Okay. And remember, you want to wok fry this chicken very quickly. You want to seal it and seal in the flavors, and then you want to add the rest of the sauce that we made earlier on. Okay, so taking up to 7 again. Now for those who just joined us, a reminder, in the sauce we had 3 tablespoons of light soy. We've had a tablespoon and a half of the rice wine vinegar. We had the sesame oil. We had a 1.5 teaspoons of that. And you can also add, instead of adding the hoisin sauce, you can use a oyster sauce. I used a hoisin sauce, and that's 3 tablespoons of that went in as well. Keep pushing down. Okay. And just let that sort of fry off. You want the chicken to be fried. Remember, use smaller pieces of chicken, roughly around 2 centimeter cubes of chicken, slightly flat pieces, so it cooks very quickly. With all Asian cooking, make sure, it does cook very quickly, but make sure your chicken is thoroughly cooked. We don't want you getting food poisoning. Okay. At this point, we're going to add the rest of the sauce that we have in the bowl. Actually, all of it in there. Coat the chicken in that. Now, in the sauce, there should have been the cornflour. As you all know, I don't like adding the cornflour to my sauce. I prefer to add it to my chicken. So I'm going to add my tablespoon of cornflour now. Okay, that's 1 tablespoon of cornflour going into your chicken. For me, it just gives the chicken a bit more sort of a crispiness to it. I don't know, I could be totally wrong. And then we're going to add the 6 tablespoons of water, and that will help sort of dissolve the cornflour as well. Thanks, Jocelyn. Yep, Marin, you're right. We shouldn't be wasting food. There's also starving people in the world right now. I know it sounds like I'm preaching to a few, but there's such handy ways of reusing stuff, like things that you eat the day before, you can use to make a new meal the next day. And especially leftover rice is something that you can use to make some of this. Okay, so just to make sure that's cooking, we're going to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's roughly about 80 mils of water that you're adding to that. And you can cook that through. Now, for those of you who saw the picture that I put up on Wednesday, I think it was, you would have noticed that it was slightly darker than the original one that I posted, the actual picture of it. And that was because I used the dark soy sauce. Today, the color is looking much more like the picture that I originally posted. So that's good. Yeah, you just want to make sure that cooks properly. Get your 3/4 cups of your cashew nuts. So if you haven't already done that, make sure you put them into the oven and you get them sort of roasted. That should be done and left to cool before you cook. And when it's cooking on the wok, you want to make sure you keep mixing things through because you want the chicken to cook evenly through. So you sort of keep moving that around the pan. 8. Welcome, Ed. Thank you for joining us as well. There's this amazing smell, and as Sheila was saying earlier on, if only we had smell-o-vision. It's really, really, it does smell really, really nice in here right now. Okay, the chicken is still not quite cooked. It needs a couple of minutes. I'm not going to rush this and sort of get it done, but just let that cook properly. Really, really important. Like I said before, with chicken you can get food poisoning so easily, so just make sure your chicken is cooked. But equally you don't want to overcook the chicken because you don't want the chicken to go rubbery. You want it to have a nice, soft, silky texture. So just sort of melts in your mouth really, but you want it to be cooked. Okay. Also, you'll notice if you're going to be using oyster sauce, it will be slightly darker. It will be more of a brown than a sort of a beigey cream, and that's perfectly fine. It'll have a slightly different flavor to mine because I have used hoisin sauce today and not the oyster sauce. Okay, at this point you want to add your green peppers. Now remember, with this dish you want to keep a bit of bite in the pepper, and you also want to add, after the green peppers are slightly cooked, you want to add the green bits of your shallots, or your spring onions as you call them here. Okay. And just let those soften slightly, but remember you want to keep a bit of bite in and texture from both the onion and from your green peppers as well. The green peppers take roughly about 2 or 3 minutes to soften in that, and then we'll be in a place where we can start to add our cashew nuts and then some of the spring onion as well. Add a bit more of my white spring onions. Okay, whilst that's cooking there, I know we have the rice in the background. Now what I'm going to be doing is taking that green spring onion that we had earlier and using it as garnish really on the top of my rice. And I just want to mix that through. And that's still hot and steaming in the background. The vegetables are nice and cooked. Looks really good. Okay. Now remember we said if you're having that on its own, then you need to add a bit of salt to it. If you're eating it together with your cashew chicken, then by all means don't, because this can be quite salty, because you've been using things like soy, which has a bit of salt, quite a salty taste to it. Okay, just going to check the sauce quickly on that. That tastes amazing. Okay, the good news is this thing is not salty today, which is great. It just shows what a massive difference it makes using a light soy sauce compared to the dark soy that I used the other day. Okay, at this point you want to probably add your cashew nuts. because you want them to cook slightly. I'm using roughly about 90 grams of cashew nuts in there, and you want to add your cashews. Obviously you can add more or less to your taste. Obviously if you're allergic to nuts, then don't be putting cashew nuts in there. That's common sense, but worth saying just in case some lawsuits come my way. Okay, so the cashews have gone in. It's looking amazing. There's lovely smells coming out of it. Just really looking forward to eating it now. But that's gonna have to wait. Okay, and then what we want to do now is take your green spring onions. So the green spring onions, just chuck those on top. Okay. That's it. Just clean up. And you just want that to steam a bit more. And give it roughly 2 to 3 minutes and your dish is going to be cooked. Okay. So I'll quickly show you what it looks like so far, so you have an idea of what this should look like. So that's what we have currently. That's your cashew chicken with green pepper and spring onion. And that's going to cook for roughly another 2 minutes. Just want to make sure those peppers soften a bit more. But you still, like I said, you want to have some bite in that. And then also taste your dish and make sure you're happy with the salt. You could add more soy if you wanted to add more soy to it, or you can add some salt to it. Now, I'm not a big lover of salt, so I'm not going to add any salt to it. I'm happy with that. But what I'm going to do now is get ready to plate that up for you and show you how I would serve that to a guest today. So today there's no fancy plating. We're going very rustic. We're just chucking the rice into a bowl. No plating rings needed. And you know, you want to make sure that you're generous with the gravy as well in here. So what you'll see forming in the pan at the moment, all the gravy is starting, all the juices are starting to sort of show up. It's nice and thick. Mix that through. Right, so I've got my rice. This is my egg fried rice that I've made. Obviously I use peppers, a bit of peas, sugar snaps, and also a bit of broccoli. Now these are things I had in my fridge, right? So you choose to use whatever you have in there and whatever works best for you. Now, I would say just check on when you sort of checking for if your dish is cooked, what you want to do is check the green pepper and make sure that it's still firm, but it's not too hard, it's nice and soft. Yeah, so that needs at least another minute. It's almost there, but it's got it's slightly hard. It's got soft bits and hard bits, but it's slightly too hard for my liking. So I'm gonna give it another minute, and then we're gonna plate that, and then we can have a look at what that looks like. Okay, so that's looking great, and we are now ready to plate up. It kind of smells like authentic Chinese takeaway without all the added bits in there. Okay, so some gravy. Right, and there we have it. That is the final dish. That is our Chinese cashew nut chicken with egg fried rice. I hope you enjoyed watching me cook that. I hope you get to try it when you start to make it for yourself. I've just garnished with a bit of basil. I like basil. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be eating for dinner tonight. I hope if you do try the dish, please do drop me a note and let me know how it went for you. And I look forward to seeing all of your dishes. Most importantly, I want to say to all of you, take care of yourself first and foremost, and then take care of each other as well. Thank you for joining me again this week, and I look forward to talking to you all next week. Take care and have a lovely weekend.